Hello everybody! If you want to read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you. Short story 487, The Motel Mystery, Intermediate. It was a dark and stormy night when Sarah arrived at the old motel. She had been driving for hours and her car had finally given up on her in the middle of nowhere. The motel was the only sign of civilization for miles around, so she decided to check in for the night. The motel receptionist was a grumpy old man who barely looked up from his newspaper as he handed Sarah the key to her room. The room itself was small and dingy, with a musty smell that made Sarah's nose wrinkle. But it was better than sleeping in her car, so she settled in for the night. Just as Sarah was about to fall asleep, she heard a loud thud coming from the room next door. She sat up, her heart racing. The thud was followed by a muffled scream, and then silence. Sarah debated whether to investigate, but her curiosity got the better of her. She crept out of her room and knocked on the door of the neighbouring room. There was no answer. She tried the handle, and to her surprise, the door swung open. The room was empty, but there were signs of a struggle. The bedsheets were torn, and there was a large red stain on the carpet. Sarah's heart was pounding now. She knew she should call the police, but something stopped her. She noticed a small piece of paper on the floor and picked it up. It was a receipt from a gas station a few miles down the road. Sarah decided to investigate further. She got into her car and drove to the gas station. The attendant was a young man who looked surprised to see a customer so late at night. Sarah showed him the receipt and asked if he remembered the person who had made the purchase. The attendant's face turned pale and he shook his head. Sorry, I can't help you," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't want any trouble." Sarah persisted, and finally the attendant relented. He told her that the person who had made the purchase was a man named Jack, and he was staying in the room next to Sarah's at the motel. The attendant also mentioned that Jack had been acting strange and had purchased a large amount of bleach and rubber gloves. Sarah's blood ran cold. She thanked the attendant and rushed back to the motel. When she arrived, she saw that the door to Jack's room was now closed. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. Suddenly, she heard a noise coming from the trunk of Jack's car. She ran over to the car and tried to open the trunk, but it was locked. She looked around frantically and spotted a crowbar lying on the ground. She grabbed it and pried open the trunk. Inside, she found a woman bound and gagged, with a look of terror in her eyes. Sarah quickly untied the woman and helped her out of the trunk. Just then, she heard a click behind her. She turned around slowly and saw Jack standing there, pointing a gun at her. "You shouldn't have got involved," he said, his voice cold and menacing. Sarah's mind raced. She knew she had to do something, or both she and the woman would be dead. She looked around and saw a fire extinguisher on the wall behind Jack. In one swift motion, she grabbed it and sprayed Jack in the face. He stumbled backwards, dropping the gun. Sarah grabbed the woman's hand and they ran towards the motel office. They burst through the door, startling the old receptionist. Sarah quickly explained what had happened and told him to call the police. The receptionist did as he was told, and within minutes the sound of sirens filled the air. The police arrived and arrested Jack. It turned out that he was a serial killer who had been targeting women at motels across the country. Sarah and the woman she had saved were hailed as heroes, and their story made headlines across the nation. From that day on, Sarah never stayed in a motel again, but she always remembered the night she had solved the motel mystery and saved an innocent life. Vocabulary notes. Dingy, adjective, meaning dirty, dull, or in poor condition. Example, the room itself was small and dingy, with a musty smell that made Sarah's nose wrinkle. Similar words, shabby, grimy, squalid, dilapidated, run down. Muffled adjective, meaning quieter or less distinct, often due to an obstruction. Example, the thud was followed by a muffled scream and then silence. Similar words, stifled, smothered, suppressed, hushed, dampened. Relent verb, meaning to give in, to become less severe or harsh. Example, Sarah persisted and finally the attendant relented. Similar words, yield, concede, acquiesce, capitulate, soften. Menacing adjective, meaning threatening, intimidating, or suggesting harm. Example, you shouldn't have gotten involved, he said, his voice cold and menacing. Similar words, ominous, sinister, foreboding, frightening, dangerous. Swift adjective, meaning quick, fast, or rapid. Example, in one swift motion, she grabbed it and sprayed Jack in the face. Similar words, speedy, fleet, nimble, agile, hasty. Startle verb, meaning to surprise or frighten suddenly. Example, they burst through the door, startling the old receptionist. Similar words, shock, alarm, astonish, jolt, stun. Hail verb, meaning to praise, acclaim, or celebrate. Example, Sarah and the woman she had saved were hailed as heroes, and their story made headlines across the nation. Similar words, applaud, laud, extol, commend, honor. Story written by Claude 3 Opus AI. Image created by DALL-E 3 AI. To read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you.